Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We will discuss the hypothalamic nuclei regarding their functions. Now we'll start with the supraoptic nuclei. Now the supraoptic nuclei, the neurosecretory cells, the neurosecretory neurons of these nuclei produce ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. Also known as vasopressin. These hormones, ADH, synthesized by the neurosecretory cells of the supraoptic nuclei excuse me, of the hypothalamus, they are transferred to the pars nervosa or neurohypophysis, posterior pituitary, through the axons of hypothalamic hypophyseal nerve tract via infundibulum. And when these neurons reaches the posterior lobe of the pituitary, they are stored in the hearing bodies. The hearing bodies lie close to the blood capillaries, and when the ADH is required, these hormones are released into the bloodstream and perform their functions. Now, how the ADH or vasopressin act? The ADH absorb water through collecting tubules of the nephrons of the kidney. Thus, the ADH maintain water balance. Lesion of the supraoptic nuclei result in a condition called diabetes insipidus. Detailed mode of action of this hormone was discussed in the last lecture when we were talking about the functions of the hypothalamus. Now, next nucleus is the paraventricular nuclei. Paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus. Now, the neurosecretory cells of these neurons, they secrete another hormone, that is oxytocin. Again, from the neurosecretory neurons of the paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus are released and transferred via the pars nervosa, transferred to the pars nervosa through the axons of hypothalamic hypophyseal nerve tract, and again reaches the pars nervosa where they are stored in the hearing bodies. And when the need arises, these hormones are released in the blood circulation and perform their action. The oxytocin result in, or it causes uterine contraction during parturition. uterine contraction during delivery, labor, or parturition. They also causes contraction of myoepithelial cells. Myoepithelial cells of lactiferous ducts. And alveoli of the breast. The myoepithelial cells have the ability to contract like muscles. They are known as myoepithelial cells because these are epithelial cells, but their property is to contract like other muscles of the body. In this way, they induce lactation. These nuclei also release corticotropic and thyrotropic hormones. Apart from oxytocin, they also release the thyrotropic hormones and corticotropic releasing hormones. And corticotropic releasing hormones. Thyrotropic and corticotropic releasing hormones, which control the release of adrenocorticotropic hormones. Release ACTH, corticotropic hormones, and thyroid stimulating hormones. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormones from the anterior pituitary. So these were the functions of the paraventricular nuclei. Next. Lateral nuclei, number 3. Lateral nuclei of the hypothalamus. These induce hunger and thirst. Stimulate hunger and thirst. This is why these are considered as hunger or feeding center. Hunger or feeding. Hunger or feeding center of the hypothalamus. Its lesions causes anorexia. Loss of appetite. Number 4. ventromedial nuclei. Ventromedial nuclei of the hypothalamus induce satiety. What is satiety? State of being satisfied, especially with food or pleasure. State of being satisfied. State of being satisfied with the food or pleasure. This is how we define satiety. Hence, this nucleus is also known as satiety center. Satiety center. It suppresses hunger and thirst. This nucleus suppresses hunger, thus it inhibits urge to eat. When the person is satisfied, and he stops eating because this nucleus suppresses the hunger and thus inhibits the urge to eat. This nucleus works opposite to lateral nucleus, that we will discuss later on. This nucleus works opposite to the lateral nucleus of hypothalamus, because lateral nucleus stimulate hunger and thirst, and this inhibits hunger and thirst. Now, the bilateral destruction of this nucleus trigger hunger. Bilateral destruction of this nucleus. The nucleus, the ventromedial nucleus of both sides is destroyed or damaged. Then it triggers hunger, resulting in hyperphagia. Resulting in hyperphagia, excessive eating, and this hyperphagia leads to obesity. Now, the resulting obesity is usually, in some cases, the resulting obesity is usually associated with hypersexuality, is usually coupled with hypersexuality. This results in a syndrome which is known as the Froehlich's syndrome. The result is obesity associated with the hypersexuality are the features of a syndrome known as the Froehlich's syndrome. When both these features, obesity and hypersexuality. So this was about the ventromedial nucleus. Next, number 5. Is the dorsomedial nucleus. Dorsomedial nuclei of the hypothalamus. These nuclei enhance gut peristalsis. That is, they have effect on alimentary canal and increases the peristalsis of the gut. They also control behavior of the individual. Control behavior of the individual with rage and other emotions. Number 6 is Archety nuclei. Archety nuclei. Also known as infundibular nuclei of the hypothalamus. Now, archety are infundibular. They produce releasing and inhibitory hormones. As I told you, hypothalamus directly act on the pituitary gland and also indirectly act on endocrine glands by releasing hormones or factors and release inhibitory factors. So the Archety nuclei, they produce releasing and inhibitory hormones. Thus these nuclei control release of hormones of adenohypophysis. Control release of hormones of anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. They also produce growth hormone releasing factor. Growth hormone releasing factors, somatotrophic hormone releasing factor, and also prolactin inhibitory factor. And prolactin inhibitory factors. Now you know the tuber cinereum, median eminence, then infundibulum, and then pars nervosa, posterior pituitary, and here is the anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. We know the vascular system, blood capillaries, primary capillary plexus. Primary capillary plexus. And these drain through infundibulum via portal veins. And when they reach the anterior pituitary, they again break up into set of capillaries. Amongst the cells of adenohypophysis, this is secondary capillary plexus. These are the cells of anterior pituitary which produce various hormones. And from this capillary plexus, blood drain through a vein, anterior hypophyseal vein, and already we talk about this. Now various releasing factors or hormones, inhibitory factors, they act on various endocrine glands, for example, thyroid gland. Then the adrenal cortex, the suprarenal gland located at the upper pole of the kidney. Adrenal gland. And act on the testes. Act on the ovary. Fallopian tube and uterus. So these release various releasing and inhibitory factors like TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, acting on the thyroid gland and produce T3, T4 hormone released into the blood circulation. Similarly, act on the adrenal gland. To release ACTH. And release the hormones of the suprarenal gland. And act on the testes to secrete male sex hormone, testosterone, and ovaries, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, LH, luteinizing hormone, acting on the ovary. To produce female sex hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. So in this way, these hormones, releasing inhibitory hormones, so this was a little more detail about these nuclei. This was about the arcuate or infundibulum nuclei. Next, number 7. Next nucleus, the supracosmetic nucleus. Supracosmetic nucleus of the hypothalamus. It controls circadian cycle. Sleep-wake system, and the way it do it is to stimulate pineal body. stimulate spinal body, which release hormone melatonin. Melatonin is considered a sleep hormone. So it is through pineal body, the supracosmetic nucleus or nuclei of the hypothalamus, they control the circadian rhythm of the body. So this is why it is considered as mind clock. This nucleus is considered as mind clock of the body. Also considered as a circadian clock, a neuro pacemaker. Or neuro pacemaker. So these different names are given to this nucleus because it controls circadian rhythm of the body. In aging, there is a marked loss of neurons of this nucleus. There is a marked loss of neurons of this nucleus. Resulting in sleep disturbances in old age. So this was about the supracosmetic nucleus. Next, number 8. Posterior nuclei of the hypothalamus. Number 8. Posterior nuclei of the hypothalamus. Control over the sympathetic nervous system, very important. Control over the sympathetic nervous system. Important component of autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic, it excites sympathetic nervous system. This nucleus. Stimulate or excite the sympathetic nervous system. It also controls the body temperature by increasing the body temperature. Control body temperature. by causing increase in body temperature. It enhances body temperature. Therefore, it acts as an anti-drop center. It controls the body temperature by enhancing body temperature. So, act as anti-drop center. Act as anti-drop center. That is, work against the lower body temperature. It raises body temperature. Now, stimulation results in various processes which favor the heat rise. Stimulation of these nuclei. When these nuclei are stimulated, they result in process that favor the heat rise. The body heat rise. Favor the body heat rise. Now, what are these processes? Numeric increase, enhance metabolism. Body metabolism. Basal metabolic rate, it is enhanced. So, by increasing metabolism, it enhances the body temperature. Causes vasoconstriction, cutaneous vasoconstriction. Cutaneous blood vessels, they undergo constriction, therefore heat is preserved. Piloerection, it is raising up the hairs. And by shivering. So through these processes, this nucleus raises body temperature. When the body temperature is lowered, so two main functions: control sympathetic nervous system, and second, have a role in regulating body temperature. Next nucleus is anterior nucleus. This was posterior, now anterior nuclei of hypothalamus. They exert control over the parasympathetic nervous system. Lateral nuclei were controlling the sympathetic nervous system, but the anterior nuclei, they control the parasympathetic nervous system by exciting it. Excite parasympathetic nervous system. Therefore, the neurons of the anterior nuclei, they are the thermosensitive. The nuclei comprise of thermosensitive neurons. which sense the changes in the body temperature also. So act as a thermostat also. These nuclei act as a thermostat of the body, or anti-rise center. The posterior nuclei are anti-drop center, role in the temperature regulation. The anti-nuclei, apart from controlling the parasympathetic system, also temperature regulation. So it when act as a thermosensitive, it comprises of thermosensitive neurons. Therefore, it acts as a thermostat or anti-rise center. Anti-rise center. Lateral nucleus was anti-drop center. So work just opposite to the opposite to the posterior nucleus, the anterior nuclei. Now this nucleus initiate mechanism for lowering the body temperature. Initiate mechanism which is involved in lowering the body temperature. It will drop the body temperature by mechanism, and this mechanism act as it will lower the body temperature because it inhibits by inhibiting the inhibits the posterior nucleus of hypothalamus. The posterior nucleus raises body temperature. Now, if it is required to drop the body temperature, then it inhibits the posterior nucleus. In this way, the body temperature is controlled and acts as a thermostat. Now, it acts by which processes? That is, by reducing the basal metabolic rate. What are the processes or mechanism? Reduces the basal metabolic rate of the body. Posterior nucleus was enhancing the body metabolic rate. The metabolism enhanced. It occurs opposite it. It causes vasodilatation, cutaneous vasodilatation. The cutaneous blood vessels are dilated, therefore there is more loss of heat, and thus body temperature is reduced. Just opposite the posterior nuclei, which causes the cutaneous vasoconstriction. Then another part of this component is sweating. By sweating and panting, as in animals. So these are the processes involved in this mechanism to lower the body temperature when it is these, especially in fever, etc. So lower the basal metabolic rate of the body causes cutaneous vasodilatation, sweating, and panting. Next, number 9. The last one was number 9. Yes, this is number 10. Next nucleus. Next is the preoptic nuclei. Preoptic nuclei of the hypothalamus. It also regulates body temperature. Regulate body temperature. So it regulates body temperature via both anterior and posterior nuclei. Via both anterior and posterior nuclei of hypothalamus. Via both nuclei of the anterior nucleus and posterior nucleus of the hypothalamus. One nucleus may be inhibited, the other stimulated, or vice versa. In this way, it controls body temperature. It regulates body temperature through generation of thirst. Regulate body temperature through regulation of thirst. This nucleus also regulates gonadotrophic hormones from anterior pituitary. Regulate gonadotropic hormones from anterior pituitary gland. Another feature of the preoptic nucleus is that it is a complex sexual diaphragmatic cells. This nucleus has a complex group of cells known as the sexual dimorphic cells. Sexual dimorphic neurons or cells are located in this nucleus also. These are important for releasing factors called these neurons or cells are important for releasing factors called gonadotropic releasing factors. Gonadotropic releasing factors. Which release luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which release luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle stimulating hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormones from the anterior pituitary in female, from anterior pituitary gland in females, and testosterone in males. So this was the preoptic nuclei of hypothalamus. Next, number 11. Mammillary bodies, nuclei of the mammillary bodies. You know, there are two mammillary bodies. In each mammillary body there is a medial nucleus and a lateral nucleus. Medial nucleus is larger. Now these nuclei are for memory formation. Function of the mammillary nuclei is for memory formation. And because the memory bodies act as a relay station between the limbic system and the thalamus. Memory formation being a relay station between limbic system and thalamus. This is why memory bodies act as a center for formation of the memory, recent memory. These mammillary nuclei, they receive inputs from hippocampus, which is a limbic lobe, via column of Fornix, and then project to the anterior nucleus of thalamus via mammillothalamic tract. So I think all the nuclei regarding their functions we discuss in this lecture. So thank you very much.